miracle, even though miracles are causally impossible. So it might be rational for a theist anyway to hope for what might be called, and this is Kant's own language, a miracle of the moral world, even if such things are causally impossible. More specifically, the miracle we rationally hope for is that God helps us to do something that we ought to do, and yet that we are fully responsible for doing it ourselves. Any strangeness we hear, and I agree there's a lot of strangeness in it, any strangeness we hear in this is similar to the strangeness in the claim that I can rationally hope that the ice cream cone will defy gravity and come back up out of the gorge and into my hand. It's not something that I could, other things being equal, rationally expect, given the laws, the causal laws, and my knowledge of them, but hope is still permitted, other things being equal. So the main story here on this fourth suggestion is just that there might be something analogous to a causal impossibility at the kind of intelligible level. There might be certain kind of laws governing what can and can't happen intelligibly as opposed to empirically, but there might be the ability to break these laws on God's part so as to do certain important things such as help us perform the revolution of the will. It's worth keeping in mind here that many early moderns thought that it was metaphysically possible for God to concur in all our free acts while still leaving us fully responsible for them. Kant, at least in some early texts, seems to agree, but even if he rejects physical concursus in the critical period, as I think Des will tell us about tomorrow, he might still regard it as metaphysically possible for God to give us special assistance in doing something for which we still end up being fully responsible ourselves. Or at the very least, Kant might regard this moral concursus, moral concurrence, to be something we can believe to be metaphysically possible, even if we can't have conviction or knowledge that it is. But such belief is all that's required for rational hope, even according to H star, the slightly stronger principle. So the suggestion here then is that the attitude of hope can be rationally adopted towards even not an empirical miracle, but a moral miracle, the actuality of divine grace on a Kantian construal. There's no violation of the Stoic maxim or the ought implies can principle as long as can is read in this kind of deepest absolute metaphysical sense rather than in either the causal sense or the causal sense. We ought to be righteous and we can make ourselves righteous from a metaphysical point of view, even though from the causal point of view, we require divine assistance. Okay, let me just wrap up here. Kant says in his lectures on the philosophical doctrine of religion, as well as in the published Religion itself, that the minimum of theology required for true religion is that the belief that God is metaphysically possible, and perhaps that if he does exist, that he commands the moral laws, that those are all that's required for true religion, at least minimally. Some commentators have read this as articulating an extremely low standard for religiosity, whereby even an agnostic or a certain kind of atheist could achieve it. So you have to just believe that it's possible. Others have viewed this position as unstable or criticized the standard as inadequate to characterize authentic religion. Perhaps we can bring these competing perspectives a little closer, however, by suggesting that Kant had noticed that hope for various things, which is what religion adds to pure Kantian morality, according to him, and how religiosity psychologically supports our efforts to accomplish the demands of the latter, according to him, that hope requires only one belief, this belief that God's existence is really possible. In other words, what he might have been saying about the minimum of theology is that we must accept that God's existence is really possible, and yet might have been thinking that hope would be a part of this kind of religious life. Religious life lived in conjunction with this belief might involve a sophisticated complex of attitudes, desires, and affections, including hope for divine grace, that wouldn't fit very well within an atheistic framework, though it would within an agnostic framework of a certain sort. So does Kant make it too easy to be religious if you just have to believe that something about God is possible? This is a common complaint. The thought would be the condition that you believe that God's existence and various other things are really possible is part of it, but it's part of this important broader story regarding hope that looks like it is much more substantively religious and sort of demanding both on your affective as well as maybe your behavioral life. So that by way of demands on the religious life in a Kantian picture. On the other hand, the attitudes here are not sort of robustly doxastic in the way that religious epistemologists have often assumed religious attitudes have to be, and they don't have the justification or warrant of the sort that religious epistemologists, especially in the analytic tradition, typically discuss. At his best, then, Kant opens up a new way to be seriously and authentically religious without worrying about what and whether we believe, at least in the contemporary sense. Thanks.